As Jews, we are a nation of leaders, each of us taking part individually in the responsibility held by the collective, a responsibility to our past, to our future, and to each other. I want to take this moment to thank you for this brief opportunity to speak with you today. This is the most exciting time to be president of Temple Beth Am, especially for me, a kid who was raised here in the 1970s, who enrolled in the day school at the age of 8 on the day after the Yom Kippur War, and who grew up here and raised his own children here. I am enthralled with Temple Beth Am, past, present, and future. And I feel blessed to lead this congregation, which has grown from 1,100 to well over 1,500 families only in the last few years, that has a thriving day school and religious school, a Torah study class bursting at the seams, programming off the charts, the best basketball league in town, sisterhood, brotherhood, film festival, on and on. We are also blessed to be in a congregation filled with the true pillars of Miami's Jewish community, as well as true pillars of the overall Miami-Dade County community. L'Shana Tova, Temple Beth Am. One of the leading Jewish rabbinical thinkers of our day, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, reminds us that in Deuteronomy, God repeatedly instructs the Jewish people to remember. Rabbi Sacks points to the Vidui Bikurim, the confession of the first fruits, where Sacks explains that in biblical times, on the harvest, every member of the community was called to the temple in Jerusalem and commanded to publicly retell the story of our people, to publicly retell that Abraham made a journey from Mesopotamia, how he went down to Egypt, how his descendants grew to a great nation in Egypt, only to become a people enslaved in a foreign land, and that of God's bringing the Jews out of slavery with a mighty hand and the delivery of the people to the land of Israel. The entire history and moral purpose of the Jewish people in one short summary. Over time, this retelling would become the obligation of every citizen of the entire nation of Israel. It would become the Passover Seder. Rabbi Sacks explains we were commanded to become historians. But then he reminds us that biblical Hebrew has no word for history. The word instead is from the root zachor, which means memory. We have memory more than we have history. For us, history is not simply accumulating knowledge. Instead, retelling our story as if we ourselves were slaves and strangers is the collective obligation of our people. It is the tie that binds and the roots of our purpose, our reason to exist as Jews in the first place. We are all guardians of this story, of this sacred memory, and each of us holds an obligation to pass it on to the next generation. It is not a supreme leader who carries this sacred duty, but all of us, each of us, every one of us in this room and around the world. It is why almost every Jew you will ever meet, no matter their degree of observance, feels a deep, abiding ache to pass it on and to keep it alive. My other favorite author and Jewish thinker of our time, Bari Weiss, editor and opinion writer of the New York Times, in her new book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, argues that the answer to the current rise in anti-Semitism is not to cower, not to hide from the fray. Instead, she says, the answer is for all of us to embrace our Jewish lives and fulfill the promise of our people. Bari Weiss, quoting who else but Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, writes, quote, "Non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism, and they are embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. What is more attractive, Miss Weiss asks, than people confident in themselves, grateful for their historical legacy, and proud of their culture? Barry Weiss also identifies the most potent force for fighting anti-Semitism. She says, that force is who we are, the force of who we are. We are a people descended from slaves who brought the world ideas that changed the course of history, she says. One God, human dignity, the sanctity of life, and freedom itself. This is our inheritance, she writes. This is our legacy. Do we believe in our own story? Can we make it real once again? She asks, and she answers her own question. I believe that we can, and that we must. Our Beth culture has always embraced these principles of celebrating and embracing our Jewish lives and values, and also of passing on our story, our collective memory, to the next generation. We have always believed in building a better and brighter future for ourselves, for our children, and our children's children. And so the Beth community, with the Beyond the Curve campaign, has again committed itself to the future of our people and our values. And that's why our synagogue continues to grow. We understand our sacred responsibility to retell and remember the story of our people. We cannot sit idle. We must continue to lead. By building a 21st century day school and new religious school facilities, we ensure the future of Jewish life in South Miami-Dade. And we inspire young children and young families to learn in an enriching environment. And we deliver a complete and outstanding education in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also an education in our rich story so that we pass it to them and they pass it to their children, much like my parents did for me when they enrolled me and my brothers at Temple Beth so many years ago, and then like my wife Mickey and I did for our children, and like so many of you have done for yours. By building a new Welcome Center, the heart of our campus, located on Temple Beth own Ben Yehuda Street, we will have a pivotal gathering place for our entire community. We will grow our basketball league with a state-of-the-art athletic center. We will have new spaces for celebrations, adult learning, prayer, performing arts, and social life. And we will likewise give our community a future where we will enrich all of our lives. Every high holidays, we ask God to be inscribed in the book of life. Much of that inscription seems beyond our control. But we can all be inscribed in Temple Beth book of life. That is completely within our control. All we have to do is open our hearts and find room to give. We have received 91 gifts and raised over $31 million to date. We owe the greatest debt of gratitude to the visionary, unimaginable, and impossible to beat leadership of Richard and Colleen Fain, of our entire steering committee, led by the extraordinary Lily Serviansky, others so involved and have given so much, Arno Crescente, Alex Chris, Dan Kopsky, Dr. Kate Lampin-Sacker, and Barbara Havenick, who we've come to call Barbara Havenick Jr., the co-chairs of our Beth Day School. Dr. Starr, unbelievable leadership and inspiring always. Bob Hirsch, my campaign co-chair Rick Siegel, our fundraising professionals Alana Gillat and Steve Pikowski, and of course our entire clergy team, led by the inimitable Rabbi Jeremy Barris. Each one of our clergy has personally given of their own hard-earned dollars to the campaign and made a pledge to be part of this. There are so many more to thank, and you know who you are, especially those who have already made your gifts. But we have a long way to go. Please, join the Beyond the Curve campaign. You won't regret it. Instead, you will likely feel great joy as this is an immediate and tangible way, a golden opportunity of playing your part to keep our story alive. And not just alive, but sustained. And not just sustained, but thriving for generations to come. I believe that we can, and that we must. Together, we will cherish, protect, and strengthen the future generations of our collective memory. That we came from a wandering Aramean who settled in Egypt, raised a family small in number, whose descendants went on to become a great nation in Egypt, who were then enslaved and degraded and humiliated by bondage, only to cry out to God, be freed with a mighty hand, and ultimately delivered to the promised land. L'Shana Tova.